Hello everyone. I want to talk about the second exam and how you can prepare for that. We'll start out with some logistics and then a little bit about what to expect and then finally how to prepare. For the logistics, and we'll go over some of this in a bit more detail on subsequent slides, you will be provided with a periodic table, solubility table, enthalpy of formation table, and specific heats table. So lots of tables there. And the idea is that you know how to use those references and know when to use those references. You will need to have a pencil and a calculator. You may have a note card. We'll talk a bit about what that will look like. And then in terms of the cell phones, just those should not be out. If you have it around in case of an emergency contact, that's fine, but it shouldn't be out in something that I would see while you're working on the exam. I did actually, before moving on, I did want to emphasize, I know I have it in italicized bold here, the calculator part. So on this exam, as on the first exam, you will need to be doing calculations that I don't expect you to be able to do without a calculator. So make sure you have a calculator and you're bringing it with you. There are some available to check out at the library. If you don't have a calculator, I might be able to find one that you can borrow, but do not take the exam without a calculator because you will probably not do well, and it's not because you don't know the chemistry, it's because you're limited by the technology. So definitely make sure you have a calculator when you come to the exam. In terms of the timing, this will be very similar to the first exam. We will have 90 minutes of class time to complete the exam, and that would be the first 90 minutes that we meet. And then after that is done, we'll work on the atomic spectral lab. Couple of notes here, so do not start on this until we're all done. So if you do finish early, just come back at 10:30 for the for the lab. We will be doing a shortened version of this lab, so we're not doing the entire thing. And because we have the exam, it's okay if you don't have the pre-lab done ahead of time. Also, again, because it is a shortened version, you're not writing out everything for the lab. And we're looking more at light. I mean, we are working with chemicals a little bit on this, but the safety issues that we have had on some of the other labs will not be as big a deal on this one. So it's okay on this one to write the procedure out as you go. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the things you'll be provided on this exam because there's a lot of them, and just to know what to expect for these things. So hopefully the periodic table you'll see here will be a bit clearer than the one you had on the first exam. I did have some people mention that it was difficult to read some of those. So just hopefully that will not be an issue again. If it is, you won't be penalized for it as long as you're showing your work. For the solubility table and the standard enthalpy of formation table, these will be the same that they were on the practice exams. So that is coming from a different textbook than the one we are using. And the reason for that is simply the formatting is easier to fit onto a page. If we were to use, for example, the appendix from your book, it would be about 16 pages long. So we don't need to get to that level of looking things up. So just be aware that when you look at the practice exams, that's what you'll be seeing on your exam. However, we will be using the specific heats table that is from your textbook. So that's table 5.1. And I don't know if there was one of those provided on on the practice exam. So that's kind of a hint that you would need to know when to look up that information. In general, for any of these four tables, the idea is knowing when to use the table, and then using it when that becomes important. The questions themselves will not tell you, go look at this table. You have to know when. When do you use the periodic table? When do you look up enthalpy of formation, etc.? So just be aware of that as you are looking at these tables on the exam. For the note card, you can have a single note card, 3 inches by 5 inches. You can use both sides, and you can print things out or staple things if that is helpful to you on your note card. But not like don't make it so it's like a book where you can turn pages on it. This is probably the last exam with a note card. The first one, there's a lot of information there. The second one, not necessarily a lot of information, but we see a lot of formulas here. So I'm sort of okay with it on this one as well. But moving into the forthcoming exam, we're kind of trying to get away from the note card for what's coming up. So go ahead and it's okay to have it for this one, but don't expect that will be the case for the remaining 2 exams. And then the practice exams are a resource that you should be aware of. So these are listed on Canvas. A couple of things to mention here. Like the first exam, you will not have those multiple choice questions, but the other questions could be have a similar structure to what you're seeing on the first exam. Like the first exam, I should mention that some of the content is covered in a different order on this semester than it was when those exams were used. Basically, if it was not covered on the first exam, it will probably be on the second exam. So between the first and second exam, on the practice exams, the first and second exam of the real exams will be covering the same material. The best way to treat this, and we'll go through some study practices a bit later, is to take it as if it were an exam and see how you feel about it, and then go back and go through anything you feel like you struggled. If you have it and you're going through it while you have your textbook open, that's not the same thing as what you'll be doing when you take the exam itself. I have heard from a few of you that the practice exam was maybe one of the most useful things for you for the first exam. Hopefully you feel the same way about this second exam. On this exam, I will again remind you, this is not meant to be a bunch of surprises. The questions you see here should be very similar to things you have already seen, or you should have already seen. The worksheets and quizzes are things that I look at as I'm preparing your exam. So you would see probably similar material to those. And again, those are designed to prepare you for the exam. As I mentioned already, the practice exam could be quite similar in terms of the types of questions that you'll be seeing. And also the homework questions will emphasize the material as well. Sometimes the homework questions will be a little bit more challenging than what you'll see on the exam. So I wouldn't look at the hardest homework question and feel like you have to have that memorized to do well on this exam. But if you are doing the worksheets, you've done all the worksheets already and still feel you need practice, working on the homework would be definitely something I would recommend. In terms of the content on the second exam, it will be just modules 4 and 5. Again, we spent extra time, kind of longer, going through module 4 because there was a lot of information there, a lot on the mole concept, and then a lot of things related to just equations in general. So we spent a bit more time there than we did on Module 5. Um, but it's about a third from each of those. So between Part 1 and Part 2 of Module 4 and Module 5, about a third from each, maybe a little bit more on than a third on Module 5. But essentially, all of this material is equally important for your exam. What I would recommend for preparing for this exam would be make sure you've done all of the worksheets. Um, if you haven't done some of those, make sure you go back and do them. Make sure you understand the MOLS worksheet. So that's a separate activity that you turned in with your group. But sometimes in a group project, not everyone knows everything. So if you didn't know everything when you turned it in, go back on your own, make sure you can do it on your own. If you would like to improve your quiz scores or feel like you need more practice on any of these concepts, go through and do the homework for each of these areas. So there's homework for each of these, Module 4 Part 1, Module 4 Part 2, and for Module 5. Once you've done all of that, make your note card. Whatever you think would be helpful to have access to while you're taking the exam. So anything you think you might just forget in the moment, you can put on that note card. Use your note card as your only reference while taking the practice exam. And then as you do that, figure out, well, what gave me the most trouble while doing this practice exam? Go back and focus your remaining study time on that. And as always, make sure to get a good night's sleep and have a good breakfast before the exam. Your body needs to be in a good place for your mind to work. And even if you don't do this most nights and most mornings, make an exception on the night before the exam. Treat yourself well the night before the exam, and hopefully that will reward you. You'll be in a good space, your mind will be clear, and you'll do very well. Good luck, everyone, and please let me know if you have any questions.